Vancouver's Chinatown was not built as a destination. It was built as a lifeline. People who were pushed to the margins, shut out of opportunity, and told where they could and could not belong. But they built anyway, store by store, family by family, a place of commerce, culture, language, food, elders, children, and resilience. Chinatown was never quiet. It pulsed, it worked, and it became magnetic. But then slowly the pulse weakened.
Like many urban centers that were facing similar issues of poverty, mental health, addiction, and homelessness.
Rising costs, aging buildings, less attention from the city racing forward. And then the pandemic hit, not as a pause, but as a rupture.
For the Asian community, the people in downtown Vancouver, the people in Chinatown, it was a whole other layer of pain.
Foot traffic vanished overnight. Seniors retreated indoors. Small family businesses lost a daily rhythm that could keep their doors alive. Layered onto this isolation was a surge of anti-Asian racism that caused people to turn away even faster. Not because Chinatown had changed, but because perception had.
Coming to Chinatown at that time with all the tension, that was probably the part I was the most nervous. I said, are people going to come?
And this is how places unravel. Not with demolition, but with absence. When people stop showing up, safety erodes, confidence collapses, and a living neighborhood starts to feel invisible.
Magic can happen. You get the right people around you.
My guest today is Carol Lee.
Her energy, her vision, and the trust that she instills in that first interaction was nothing short of magical.
And what she saw in that moment was not failure. She saw a break in connection, an absence of belonging.
You need to give people pride in their past to have hope for the future. I wanted to elevate this history so that people would want to come back and reclaim it.
And she understood something fundamental. You do not save a place by talking about it. You save it by bringing people back into it.
He said, who's going to care about Chinatown? I said, anybody who grew up in Vancouver, Chinese or non-Chinese, because it was such a big part of the city's fabric.
And through the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation, she helped ignite Light Up Chinatown. Light was not a decoration, it was an invitation.
You have to make it fun as well. So I've kind of surrounded myself with people, a small ecosystem of people that actually believe that if we work together, we can have a better city.
Lanterns went up, art filled the streets, people returned, and with people came safety, pride, and momentum.
I think it's almost like a moment of relief and disbelief.
This is the story of how Chinatown reminds the city who it is and how one person helped turn darkness into belonging.
You know, times are tough, and I think one of the things that we try and do is inspire hope in people that, there's people out there that care about you.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast, and ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated. Let me now introduce you to Carol Lee. Carol Lee, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me on the show.
I think there's a core word that's going to roar through this entire video, and it really is about community. So let's go back to 2012 when you created the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation. And at the time, what should have been a landmark, something of beauty, was in a state of decay. So take us back to then and what you were hoping to accomplish, bringing like-minded people together to bring the magic back to this neighborhood.
I came back and it was a very different neighborhood than I remember growing up, which was vibrant. It was fun. It was the center of a lot of activity, but it was nothing really new. And in fact, when I was looking through my father's effects, he passed away, and I found a letter from the city of Vancouver dated 1967 that said, "What do we do with Chinatown?" So, it's like many urban centers that were facing similar issues of poverty, mental health, addiction, and homelessness. And so in 2012, I set up something called the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation. It was a registered charity. And the idea was to bring a lot of like-minded people together to figure out how we could try and solve some of these big social issues.
And when you bring people together and they look around the first time in this neighborhood in disarray, how did you convince them that this was something that had possibility, that you could return the magic and make it even better?
It was a very tough task because even my father, who was no stranger to difficult challenges, said it's impossible. And I think that he'd seen his father and his brother like being part of this community that was, there's a lot of political activism. And he said it was impossible. And I said, look, if we don't try and do it, who's going to want to do it? And so I tried to find people that had some sort of roots that, grew up and remembered Chinatown in its heyday and said, let's see if we can band together and try and revitalize this neighborhood. The first few years, I would say for the first 5 years, it was really tough. Even my family didn't believe it was going to be possible. But over time, you gather a little bit of momentum and, those early partnerships. And, I think about the people that believed in us, and I had a lot of corporate sort of support. RBC was right up there in the very beginning, believing in us when even I would say that my own family wasn't very strong on the idea. So
one of the things I want to get across in this interview, in this podcast, is how you've managed to attract these people and they stay with you for a lifetime. Time and time again, when I've researched, that's the one thing they say about Carol is you're a force of positive human nature. Where did that come from?
My father and his father. So they were big community builders. And, I think about how much more difficult their jobs were. My grandfather came over as a 13-year-old sort of like houseboy. And then my father was born in 1933. So, in the height of the Depression. And also there was a lot of discrimination, but they were very positive and it was infectious. And I grew up with that. I think that same sort of positive spirit. And I think the other thing that they always looked out for too was that the people have stayed with us because I've always thought if I look after my partners, we will be fine. It was about thinking about the greater good. And that really is a principle that I've, borrowed from my father. You can take less as long as the whole, we're all better off. People, when they see that demonstrated over and over again, they stick with you. So I feel very lucky that, most of the people that have started with me on this journey are still there.
Fast forward now to the pandemic, where you're starting to get some wind at your back. Next thing you know, this hits. Fingers start pointing. People are scared. They don't know who to turn against. And there was a lot of backlash against the Asian community. At the same time, your streets were emptying out. Not only was I angry, but at the same time, I wasn't going to show any support. And almost overnight, anything you had created was really collapsing around you.
It's in times like that you realize, what you're made of. And I wasn't really thinking about myself. I was thinking, okay, what about my neighborhood? How can I help these people? And a lot of them are, small business owners. They might not speak the language. We kind of got down to brass tacks and, the government was providing a lot of, supports during COVID. And I think that the way we approach is that we needed to get the message to the people on the ground that might not be able to do it. So we worked with all of the banks actually and we did door knocking. So we got 80 or 100 of the local businesses. We found out who they banked with because there was all of these different opportunities, loans that were forgivable. So we basically did matching. Every bank gave us somebody who had, language ability to not just explain to them what the program was, but actually make sure they got through the program. And it was hugely successful. So I think that with that program alone, there was probably almost $4 million that came into the neighborhood in terms of government support. Another thing that we did is we started something called Light Up Chinatown. So we thought, we need to get people to come back into the neighborhood to support small business. RBC came to our rescue. It was 1 month before we wanted to have this event, and we didn't have any sponsors. And so they agreed with 4 weeks to go to be the presenting sponsor. And that first year, we had 5,000 people. And I think that, the one thing we're good at trying to do is give people hope. And I think that the merchants were just overjoyed that there was this many people that wanted to come and support them. And since then, so last year we had our 5th year and we had 22,000 people, and it's become a signature event now in the city of Vancouver.
So Carol, I just want to wind that back because you just let it flow that we had a month to go. And from what I understand, you moved mountains in that month.
Well, we couldn't have done it without Carmen and Martin Thibodeau. He was part of our little group. I had put together a group for economic revitalization and he volunteered to be on it, which was amazing. I'm good at mobilizing a lot of people. you have to make it fun as well. So I've kind of surrounded myself with people, a small ecosystem of people that actually believe that if we work together, we can have a better city. The first year was a bit of an experiment, but it was a huge success. I know that some of the merchants said they hadn't seen that many people all at once in like a few decades. Then all of a sudden people want to start participating. Once you have success, it's amazing. You get this momentum that people want to join. They're looking for things to support. In the beginning with my father, he was very skeptical because he said, who's going to care about Chinatown? I said, anybody who grew up in Vancouver, Chinese or non-Chinese, because it was such a big part of the city's fabric.
Talk to me about the first night when you're probably heading in, wondering if anybody's going to show up. You're questioning because it's a brand new thing. What did it feel like to see so many people come into Chinatown and see the magic unfold?
I think it's almost like a moment of like relief and disbelief. You're relieved that people actually showed up, and then disbelief that it turned out to be better than you expected. We actually hired a videographer, and because you can't be everywhere. So what we tried to do for this event is we actually had a passport system because there's 16 blocks and we want to make sure that people moved around. And so people had to get stamps, and then we offered free prizes. To watch it sort of on video afterwards, it was the cross section of people, families, all nationalities and backgrounds, people of all ages, older people, seniors. It was just phenomenal. And then what we've been able to do over the years is improve the prizes. At first, people weren't really like signing up for the passport program. I said, oh, maybe we need to get better prizes. Tickets to Beyonce and then Coldplay. And a couple of years ago, thanks to RBC Wealth Management, they donated tickets to, can you imagine, Taylor Swift. So we really kind of put our name on the map as a place that everybody wanted to attend.
Carol, another lesson I think that we can all learn from you is how much you're willing to share the success. It's the team that we brought together and we had fun and we made it happen. Is that a lesson in life for other people that we should be thinking about when you have something that starts getting momentum like you have now with your fifth year? It's no longer, will people come out? It's how do we make it better? Is that a lesson that that it's so important not to have the spotlight just shine on you and in fact have it bask on so many others?
Well, because you can't do this kind of community work and like mobilize this many people with just a me. And there's just so many people that have been responsible for this, including people that have worked at the foundation. We have so many volunteers, people on advisory boards, sponsors like RBC. We've, Rogers. I'm just trying to think. We've had so many different corporate the connects. People are liking what is happening and that they can see that, oh, this isn't just the foundation. It's working with government, other nonprofits, community organizers, corporations, and philanthropists.
So the neighborhood changes swagger. I mean, it's one thing to have that night or a couple of nights, 5,000 people come in. I haven't seen this many people in decades, but did it have a lasting impact? Did it start turning the tide from impossibility to possibility and from negativity to positivity?
Many years ago, when we started on this journey of revitalization, my business partner at the time, he's since passed away, Henry Fung, and I came up with this 3-pillar approach of interconnected pillars of revitalization: economic revitalization, cultural revitalization, and physical revitalization and social housing. And they all have to kind of work together. Even last year, we helped 100 businesses, either, an awning refresh or, painted the storefront. We had a number of businesses that we did their digital marketing. On some of them, their revenues have gone up 30% because now we're attracting a different, younger audience. Wall Street Journal noticed. So there was an article that was written December 29th, 2025, and it was in the travel section. It said, if you want to visit Vancouver, you have to go to Chinatown, the most exciting neighborhood in the city. The restaurant community, it's very exciting. We have the highest number of Michelin recommended and Michelin star restaurants. We have 3 of the 50 best bars in the world. Things are happening. I actually own a Chinese restaurant too. This happened in early days. I wanted to show people what an authentic revitalization might look like. So I started a barbecue restaurant, and my father, of course, was appalled. I actually don't speak Cantonese. Restaurants are notoriously difficult. I'm not really a foodie, but I thought that this is something that I wanted to do for the community. And 8 years later, I'm proud to say, according to Google reviews, at least, we're one of the highest rated restaurants, period. Ours is a people-centric approach. If you raise the infrastructure around the people, it lifts the people up. One of my advisors pointed that out. He said, he's an architect, and he said, typical revitalizations that we've seen tend to be around buildings where the people are moved out, and then, we build new buildings or we upgrade these buildings. It's a higher socio and economic group, and then new businesses come in. But I said, but what if we want to keep the people, which is what we have tried to do, keep the people, and it kind of works. We've got something called Bob and Michael's Place, which we built, and it was the first project that we actually embarked in at the Chinatown Foundation, which was actually for our neighbor in the downtown east side. And I had to convince my board that we were going to build this housing, and I was going to have to raise $30 million for the next door neighbor. And we actually hadn't even done anything. But the idea was, once again, if you provide housing where you give people dignity, what happens to those people? So in this building is 231 units. 120 are at welfare rate, and the other 111 are at, like we call it here, housing income limit. So it's rent geared to income. It's been an amazing experiment. I was there about a month ago, and it's like market housing, and yet half the people are living on welfare. It's immaculate because the people that live in there have pride of place, and so they look after it. And what our job was to do was to provide the supports through many donors. So we have a community partnership program. So we have 40 different companies and organizations that provided goods and services under 3 pillars: life skills and mentoring, health and wellness, and experiences. RBC, once again, they did a class. We asked people what they were interested in. They wanted financial literacy. And so they provided a class on, and the next day, one of the residents in the welfare side wrote us a note and said, with this class, was able to sign up for a TSFA account. So this is what we want. And now what has happened a year later, 5 of the people in the shelter side have had to move out because now they're employed. If you support the people, what can happen? And I think there's lots of good things that can happen.
I have to believe that what you created is not something that's exclusive to Chinatown, but it could be inclusive to communities across Canada. I mean, what you're doing is build it and they will come. Create a place to be and live, as opposed to pushing out people that can't afford it as your only means of revitalizing a neighborhood. I think it's brilliant.
And, there's a lot of support for this. For that particular project, Bob and Michael's, I think in the beginning, government, they didn't think that, we could do it. To raise $30 million for social housing was unheard of. But I knew that if we didn't take that on, it would still be an empty parking lot. So my first meeting for that project was in 2011. And so that's how long it took. We did the groundbreaking in 2021 and we opened in 2023. But by the time we had to deliver, everybody realized government can't provide all this housing. We're going to have to figure out how we can pitch in. We had an amazing team. The architect, Winglam, did this as a community service, didn't charge us. The builder, which is part of the Boza family, the Axiom Boza, they also did this. And it's like, well, we don't want to make money. You raised to a higher standard. And it was interesting because by the time it was over, I know that the builder, Axiom, was saying that some of the trades were saying the finishing in this building is better than their market housing because people cared about it. They cared about the people that were going to be living in this building. For most of them, it'll be the nicest housing, that they've ever lived in it. And we didn't stop there. We had an art program. 2 artists, well-known artists, Angela Grossman and Martha Sturdy, who said, let's have art in this building. So we got 7 artists, including Doug Copeland and Stan Douglas. We raised $500,000 for the housing project. But I think more importantly, or just as importantly, we had high resolution copies in the building. So this building is filled with beautiful art. But it's about getting everybody involved. They loved being part of it.
The finger pointing that went on in the early stages of the pandemic, when people thought maybe the source was China and people were just scared, fight or flight syndrome, that must have really hurt a lot of people in that community because that was something they weren't in control of, but were the victims of.
I think you just do everything you can do to support people. we did a number of things. As I said, we did door knocking so that we knew everybody who had a business could access the government support. So that was one thing. We also run an SRO, so the single room occupancy hotel. So it's called the Maywa, and you've got seniors and most people who are on welfare living there. And what we were worried about is that because you're a shared bathroom, shared kitchen, like how were they going to get food? Because people really weren't able to go out. So we managed to raise, so we did one of those, fundraising exercises. So we raised about $100,000 to provide meals. And we were innovative about it because it wasn't just about serving those people. We said, how can we use this money to support small business? We partnered with the restaurants that were in the neighborhood. And so we would rotate, and every 2 days we would have a different restaurant. In addition, one of the partners that I've got, Fresh Direct, they offered to give fresh fruits twice a week, and they're still doing it. People felt looked after. People need to know that somebody cares about them. And I think that is what we do well at the foundation, is that how do we look after our neighbors? That's a good lesson for all of us. And especially I think today, times are tough. And I think one of the things that we try and do is inspire hope in people that, there's people out there that care about you.
Talk to me about where the festival's gone. The first time it was just to send a signal to the world. You were still alive and breathing. You still had a pulse. It's turned into, tens of thousands of people and bigger prizes and such. Do you have the same energy for it now that it's got its natural momentum, or does Carol step aside and let somebody else take it over because you've got another cause that's mounting, another way for you to ride?
We're happy where it is. Bigger is not always better. It's about bringing lots of different people in. I think one of the things that we're good at is partnerships. And so, for instance, the food collaboration, we have something we call Hawker's Lane. So we got a lot of different vendors. Some of them are from Chinatown, some of them are not. We've had, Michelin-starred chefs that have come to participate. So I think it's always keeping things kind of fresh and interesting, new partnerships, and getting people to come down just to see what the neighborhood has to offer. We've got entertainment, and people love going on stage, and we mix it up with, sort of traditional kinds of entertainment. We've had Cantonese opera, K-pop. So it's fun.
Now, if your dad was still with you and the mayor of Vancouver was to write to them about Chinatown, what do you think the letter would say today?
They're happy with the way that Chinatown has shown its resilience is revitalizing. I think my dad would be, somebody actually just sent me a note yesterday, was one of his classmates, and said that, oh, your dad would be so proud.
Carol, we came in to talk about Light Up Chinatown, but, there's other initiatives you're doing, like the Learning Lab. So share with me some of the other seeds that have grown as such magical senses of belonging for your community.
We created the Chinatown Storytelling Center. We opened in 2021, and it was actually the first permanent exhibition space to showcase the Chinese Canadian experience. And 5 years after we opened, it's really manifesting itself in the way we envisioned, which was becoming a cultural and community hub. Early on in sort of my journey, I think it was probably back in 2017, one of my advisors, who I love dearly, gave me an example of something where the principle basically was you need to give people pride in their past to have hope for the future. And that kind of was my guiding light. I wanted to elevate this history so that people would want to come back and reclaim it. I grew up in an era where, I was in the British properties and not a lot of people looking like me, and you really didn't want to be Chinese. And I wanted to change that and to have people sort of in some ways embrace their heritage and where they came from. And not just for the Chinese, the whole city is that way, because this neighborhood was an important part of the social fabric of the city. So it has been a huge success. We host all different kinds of events there. And our most recent exhibition is entitled Vitality: Iconic Images, Hidden Stories. And what we did is I was asked about a couple of years ago by a guy named Andy Sylvester, who owns Equinox Gallery here in Vancouver, and he controls the estate of Fred Herzog. And Fred Herzog is a well-known Vancouver photographer that captured the vitality of Vancouver during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And what we did is we took images and then we paired it with archival photos and hidden stories. And we have a special exhibit and we did a book. And I just think that, what this book does and what these images do is they give people hope for the future and inspire them to see this is the way the neighborhood used to look and we can have that again. And so that's, one of the things that we're also very proud of. And in May of this year, we're going to be opening the Basements, a learning lab, which is an immersive area. And it's really for kids to learn.
Carol, I always end my podcast with my 3 takeaways. And one is so beautiful is what you just said. You have to have pride in your past to have hope for your future. I love that. We spend so much time today in the present and worried about the future, but your ability to create that arc and remind people of what we were, where we are today and where we can go, I think is truly your superpower. And I know you'll say it's everybody's superpower. It's truly something that you do really well. And the second thing is just this ability to realize that one person can begin a domino that impacts such wonderful change. And that change is not just the fact that there's a new awning on a new facade, but the fact that there's people living with dignity, with art. People have a new swagger for the neighborhood. They have a pride. They have a higher sense of purpose. They care about the place they are. And I think the third one is just your wonderful sense of humanity. It takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to raise and lift a city. And you have certainly done that. So thank you for joining me on Chatter That Matters.
Thank you so much for having me on. And I feel lucky to be surrounded by so many people who have the same vision of what's possible. Magic can happen. You get the right people around you. So thanks, Tony.
When we return, I explore the role that organizations play in helping communities thrive. I'm joined by 2 guests, the very passionate and inspirational Martin Thibodeau, who's the president at RBC Vancouver, and someone with so much heart, Carmen Stossel. She's the Regional Director of Community Marketing and Social Impact at RBC. And each share their perspectives with this amazing story of community, resilience, and revitalization, and why they hold Carol Lee so dear to their heart. Think of a vibrant community as a living scrapbook, a collection of images and anecdotes and moments taped together. Not all make headlines, but all make the people who live there. The teenager who finds confidence for the first time, not in a classroom, but in a local program that tells them you matter. Or the newcomer who arrives unknown and uncertain, but finds an immediate sense of belonging when they're welcomed by a neighbor. The small business owner who keeps the lights on because the community chose to show up. The volunteer who comes back again and again, never asking for anything, but quietly doing their part to hold the social fabric together. Everyone deserves a community that is not just safe and secure, but warm. Not just a place to live, but a place to be loved, a place to belong, a place to contribute, a place to grow up and to grow old. At RBC, community is not a backdrop, it's our commitment. And I want to give a big shout out to RBC's community marketing and social impact teams. Every day they invest their time, energy, and resources to put the you into your community. They invest in our youth, in our charities, and in the events that bring people together, turning good intentions into real momentum. Because when a community is supported, the scrapbook fills up with better moments, more opportunities, more connections, and more people who feel that they belong. Strong and vibrant communities, they matter to you, to me, and to RBC.
Once you have success, it's amazing. You get this momentum that people want to join. They're looking for things to support. Ours is a people-centric approach. If you raise the infrastructure around the people, it lifts the people up.
Joining me today is Carol Lee, who created the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation and embodies one of my favorite quotes: "If you can dream it, you can do it."
They were a true partner. I don't know how they do it. It's very different than most other organizations. I couldn't do without them.
So joining me now is Martin Thibodeau. He's the regional president for RBC in British Columbia.
Yeah, Tony, it's my pleasure to be here today.
Before we talk about all the wonderful things RBC does in community marketing, specifically the role you played helping Carol Lee with Light Up Chinatown, I think we have to spend a few minutes and talk about the tragedy that happened at Tumbler Ridge last week in BC.
Well, to say it's been hard would be an understatement. We never think that a tragedy of that magnitude and violence can happen in Canada. It's a small community. We happen to have a branch in that community. So we have employees there. We have clients. It's been very hard. And to your question is what we can do is to provide support. So immediately reached out to the team, community partners, some that are in Tumbler Ridge, but some that are more operating at the BC level, like United Way. Send the messages, the support, non-financially and financially. Finding the resources for people that are impacted. It's been very hard, but I would say the community and Team RBC has been very good and very resilient at being there in the weeks and months to come. How well are we going to make sure we stay close to the community, to our clients, to our employees in that beautiful part of British Columbia?
You know, Martin, I'm always amazed, and I've worked with RBC over the years, that as big as your organization is, and equally as big as Canada is, you find a way to make yourself very small when it matters. When tragedies happen, whether it's domestic or international, I'm very proud to say that RBC is one of the first to step forward, realizing that this is going to have an impact for months, if not years to come. And when you lend a shoulder, you have to lend a shoulder for that time period. So I really do appreciate you and your team. I have to switch now because we just listened to this incredible story of this girl coming back to the Chinatown she once thought of and seeing it in disarray. And that was in 2012. And she talked about how something had to be done. Right away, you were mentioned as somebody that came on board, again, not just to write a check, but to make a commitment. And that commitment included you joining her board. So tell me a little bit about the magic of Carol Lee, that she can encourage someone like you to find the time and the resources because she let you know it mattered.
I met Carol and right away, her energy, her vision, and the trust that she instills in that first interaction was nothing short of magical. She has something special, the gift of being real, having a vision, but it's also a gift of getting things done. And I felt that during that first interaction with Carol.
Now fast forward to the pandemic, and it impacts the entire world. A lot of fingers are pointing towards the Chinese community. And with that, Chinatown suffers even more. People just abandon it, a lot of racial slurs, even defacing of buildings. And she comes up with this idea saying, we have to light this town up. We have to make people believe in again. But what I thought was extraordinary is she said, we're going to do this in a month. What gave you the confidence on that risk or reward, especially for a banker to say, I'm all in?
During my first year, my first summer, she convinced me to also come on board of the Chinatown Foundation gala to raise money to revitalize Chinatown. I took a leap of faith because, again, I had already a special bonding with Carol, but she delivered on that first gala I had never seen in my life. And she just made it happen. People came. It was a remarkable event. So to your question, during the pandemic, it was so hard living in British Columbia and seeing all these tensions, racial tensions. So one of the early thought for me was, okay, the cost of doing nothing is far superior than doing something. We need to do something. And again, Carol gave me the cold notes of what she wanted to do. I said, what a wonderful idea. 4 weeks was not even a consideration. I said, she's going to pull that off for sure. How do we actually launch this and do a lot of marketing? And marketing bring the people, because the marketing was one thing, but bringing the people was still the pandemic. And we were allowed to come together, but it was coming to Chinatown at that time with all the tension. That was probably the part I was the most nervous. I said, are people going to come? But she rallied the whole community and people came. And that was the start of just another amazing journey and really making a difference. Seeing how it's now thriving and growing every year makes me so proud. And it's all to Carol's credit.
This isn't about financial capital. This is about emotional capital. This is about getting in and getting involved and getting engaged. And is that really the secret behind community marketing? People in the community showing that they care, that they're willing to do their part to turn possibility into something as special as Light Up Chinatown.
For me, it is the secret sauce is that involvement. to have Team RBC involved. Either it's Light Up Chinatown, the Storytelling Center, the Chinatown Foundation. My team shows up and, for example, at Light Up Chinatown, we have an excess of 100 volunteers over the weekend on their personal time. And I don't force anyone to do this. It's just they show up. That's more important than the financial. Of course, you need some, financial support to make an event. But if you don't have the people's heart coming and getting involved, working and partnering with Carol's team, then it doesn't have the same magic.
I always measure moments in my career by how it made my heart feel. And when I talked to Carol about the first Light Up Chinatown, and she talked about 4,000 or 5,000 people, but the community realized, and they hadn't seen so many people in decades, the slumped shoulders became shoulders back, and the frowns on the faces became smiles. I have to believe that same emotional reward not only roars through you, even at the president's level, but any of those 100 volunteers that work there, realizing that today I'm not in the business of credit cards or loans. I'm in the business of smiles and experiences and reminding people how special it is to have a community like Chinatown radiating through the whole entire city of Vancouver, if not the province of British Columbia.
Absolutely. Over the years, and this year was a good example of that. I walked around a few blocks and I had never seen so many smiles. That was the best reward. And that's what our employees that are coming to volunteer. They also see that there's a change here. And then even the change after the event, people aren't afraid to come back to Chinatown. They see that it's a beautiful place to support local businesses and make sure that we preserve that beautiful cultural treasure that is Chinatown in Vancouver.
Carol early on says that in her father's archives, after her father passed and she's going through it, she saw a letter from the mayor of Vancouver saying, what are we going to do with Chinatown? Because it was in such disarray. I asked her to say, what would that letter be today if the mayor was writing Carol, or if her dad in heaven had a way to bring a message to Carol? What do you think they would say about Carol Lee? Or what would you say if you wrote a letter to Carol Lee?
Well, I would say that her impact and her influence are really a game changer. She thinks outside the box. She has a vision, but she also has a way to execute it and to bring it to life and make real change quickly. And we've seen this since 2012, Chinatown. And sometimes it's small steps every year, but then you look back now 14 years later, the changes with the Storytelling Center, Bob and Michael's Place, the Light Up Chinatown, and so much more. She's an influencer and a game changer as a leader and as a human being. I'm so grateful that she became a friend.
Martin, I really appreciate you taking the time, especially everything that's going on in BC right now, and paying tribute to Carol Lee, because she truly is demonstrative of what we can do when one individual believes in lighting up possibility. And I think what she's created in Chinatown can be replicated across Canada, letting people know that communities matter, citizens that live within it matters, and organizations like RBC who get involved with more than just a check or wanting a logo somewhere understand what the end game is. That's what makes this humanity special and community special. So thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. The world needs more Carol Lees.
Joining me now is Carmen Stossel. She's the Regional Director of Community Marketing and Social Impact for RBC. Carmen, great to have you on.
Thanks, Tony. It's great to be here.
We were talking before the interview about how much you think of Carol Lee. So why don't we start there and tell me about this extraordinary woman who's done so much for the Chinatown community.
Carol Lee is a visionary force in our community, and truly, I meet a lot of people in my work in community investment at RBC, and she is a standout human. It's been a joy to work with her in bringing her vision of Light Up Chinatown to life. It's really coming from a place of care and community. It's been an honor of my career.
Let's wind the clock back. COVID hits, a lot of fingers are pointing, many of them towards the Asian community. Chinatown suffers. It goes dark. And Carol Lee says we've got to do something.
COVID was really a scary time. It was really heavy. I live in downtown Vancouver, very close to Chinatown, and where Light Up Chinatown takes place. And it was frightening for everybody and so many unknowns for the Asian community, the people in downtown Vancouver, the people in Chinatown. It was a whole other layer of pain. The anti-Asian sentiment, the hate that was coming out during that time was heartbreaking. People didn't know quite what to do or how to address it. And for a part of our city that has always represented such vitality, such vibrancy, such life, and to see it quite literally, the light dimming, it was really hard to see and hard to witness.
What I really love about this story is it started with one spark in Carol Lee. In the early days, did you feel it was just a risk that we have to try to do something, or did you just from day one feel that there was enough there that with RBC support, with the Lee Foundation support, with Carol's energy, this would work?
Well, if you put Carol Lee at the front or at the engine of anything, it's going to work. We knew that this was something that we had to get behind, quite literally Light Up Chinatown. She was very clear in her vision of what she wanted to do to support the merchants, the residents, the wider community, to have a safe outdoor place where people could gather in a time where people weren't gathering outdoors. So it wasn't a question of whether we knew we were going to support it. It was the fact that she wanted us to come on as the presenting sponsor, and the event that she wanted to pull off was 4 weeks away. We just trusted her vision and knew that with the support of other partners and our employee base that really came together to get behind this project, that we could help bring the vision to life. It was a pretty big undertaking. After a pause, if you remember, there was nothing happening. The event muscles were a little atrophied. So to bring it together in 4 weeks and then to have the thousands of people come out for that first weekend was really, truly inspiring.
That must have been one of the most extraordinary moments in your career. I mean, community marketing is important. Social impact is important. RBC is very involved in both fronts. But to actually see what happens when a place that had gone dark, a place that was absorbing so much negative energy, turns into this wonderful celebration. It must have been just magical for you.
I'll never forget it. This was never just going to be about putting our logo on a banner. As an organization, we talk a lot about being purpose-driven, but to be a purpose-driven organization that aspires to help our clients thrive and communities prosper, it always has to be more than a logo. So to see that sea of blue, of RBC Blue, in amongst the community, and to see the elders, the residents there coming out to be in community after being kind of shut in their homes for so long, to see the family is bringing back their children, to having our employees. This was our first event out in community to be there supporting. It was bringing our purpose to life and really truly showing up for community. And to be able to grow that event year after year. I mean, I think the first year we had 5,000 to 7,000 people. And over these past couple of years, it's well over 24,000 people. The number of merchants that are involved every year, to see the growth, it really has brought community investment, community marketing to life. Yes, definitely a career highlight.
When you're talking about community marketing and this whole sense of helping Canadians thrive and communities prosper, it's a big part of what community marketing does, but there had to be some risk element. I mean, 4 weeks, I appreciate Carol as this force of human nature, but that takes a lot of courage because you're putting your brand out there. What gave you the confidence and that superpower to say, this is going to work? Who do you feel had the courage at RBC that said, we're going to do this, we're going to make it happen? Was that you? Was that Martin?
It was absolutely Martin Thibodeau, our regional president. He really is an extraordinary business leader who understands how important community is. And our experience working with Carol and the Vancouver Chinatown Foundation and her team that she's assembled in that extraordinary organization, we know the kind of gold star standard work that she and her team are able to create.
These experiences in life where you really make magic happen and you see people coming to your community event and they're smiling, their eyes are shining, and that negative energy turns into positive energy. This isn't once in a lifetime. This is something you do day in and day out at RBC with both your community marketing and your social impact. So is there a lesson that we can all take away and apply to our life and the neighborhoods that we live?
Community isn't just about creating, an event or a gathering where people can come together. Sure, that is absolutely part of it. An event like Light Up Chinatown, there's fun and joy, there's food, there's dancing, there's all of that. And that is an incredible community event. But it's more than that. I feel like the sense of belonging that's created when you have leaders or visionaries or people like Martin and Carol and all of the employee volunteers that come out to help build community. There's a sense of belonging that comes from truly caring. So if there's one thing I've learned from Carol that I will take with me for the rest of my career and probably my life is this idea of leading with care and compassion. It's an impact that ripples beyond the event, beyond the social media post, the marketing. It's a deep feeling of heart and care. If you can create that and find incredible partners to make that kind of magic happen, well, that's a life well lived and a career that I can feel proud of.
Your humility is beautiful. You give so much credit to so many people, Martin, Carol, but I can tell you that people think so highly of you because you bring that love and care and compassion and humanity. You really, truly put the person in RBC's brand personality. So thank you for joining me. You've been just delightful to talk to, and I'm so proud of what you're doing and the fact that you're going to be continuing to do it next year and make it an even bigger and better event.
Thanks, Tony. It was a joy to speak with you.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.